I guess to sort of kick this off, so Paul kind of teed this off, so kind of why these guides now? And I think, as Paul alluded to, these 3 publications kind of came out in 2026. I think, we have conversations on a daily basis, I would say, with our clients, and there seems to be a widening gap sometimes of, what frameworks out there say versus what we see clients say they do versus what they're doing in practice, right? So I guess what are some of the biggest governance risk control things that you kind of see right now, and what do you hope some of these guys kind of help to close or to direct organizations toward?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that probably will not be surprising to anybody is the level of change and the level of risk that we're all dealing with that's coming at us, that's coming at organizations, at our processes, at our industries. And so there's a lot of great studies out there if you're data-driven. I love data. I love looking at reports. I love looking at trends. I think it helps the conversation. But AICPA actually does a great report every year on an annual basis with University of North Carolina, their ERM practice. One of those data sets that you'll see in that particular report is that, about 50% of companies these days actually do report risks at the board level. So we are, in a fairly mature enterprise world that we operate in, right, globally. And so we still just have a shortage of appropriate reporting mechanism and communication around risk. And so in the same report, you will see that those same respondents had reported 85% of them reported that they had a significant operational issue happen to them in the last 5 years. So some of that can be explained. You were just on the cusp of finishing COVID, and obviously that had a huge impact. But still, to this day, even the data from 2025, still 85% are having operational issues and are facing significant risks. So as we, again, a lot of great information out there. If you look at the World Economic Forum annual report on risk, it gives you great information on what companies are dealing with and also what we anticipate is coming. And that's really important because of the publications that we have issued. So we're trying to equip organizations and practitioners with tools and practical guides. And I think each one of these publications sort of has a practical guide, either in a name or in how it's structured and the content that it provides to companies to be able to manage what's happening around them and hopefully get ahead of that, right? That is the goal where you want to get to. And so when you just at a high level talk about Gen AI, right? We're all trying to figure out AI is here. We're all using it. We're all encouraged to use it. How do you do it in a controlled, governed way to make sure that you are able to reap the benefits of it, but do it in a controlled way that helps your organizations as opposed to creates future risk or current risks, right? So that particular publication, I think it's very timely. It provides great guidance, great practical guidance. Then our governance paper, when you think about COSO, the very first foundation of all of our frameworks is a governance piece. It's setting the stage. It's having that tone at the top. It's figuring out how you're going to govern yourself, what is important, the culture component, the ethics component, right? That is where it's all staged at. And if you don't get that right or establish that, all of the other elements kind of become secondary and potentially not as successful as you want them to be in their implementation and deployment. So we really felt that in this rapid rate of change, talking about governance and having those grounding practices is really important to set yourself up and be able to manage that rate of change, those risks, those opportunities, right, that come with risk effectively. And then the last publication is our ERM publication. That particular guide, as a former practitioner, I geek out about a lot because it truly is a neat, different view about ERM that makes it more personable, more adaptable, more agile to implement in your organization. It really takes this very elaborate framework that we have, which is a fantastic publication, but kind of breaks it down into more digestible pieces. So for those companies that are trying to deploy risk management in a more agile way, how can you do it? How can you do something in 30 minutes versus an hour versus, dedicate some time on a monthly basis and incrementally start doing something to help your organization so that you're not one of those 85% at the end of the day. So I think these guides are really helpful to help with that conversation, and I know we're going to talk about them a little bit more.
Yeah,
and the best thing about all of them, I know you have the links, but they're free on our website. So these are free publications really for anybody to use.
And I think that that's an important distinction, Lucia, is these are publications. They're not frameworks outside of the practical guide of ERM's framework, right? And so let's talk about that for a second, because you really, the two, maybe three frameworks that you have, ICIF, ERM, and then the fraud piece, that's the core of COSO, right? And when somebody looks at this and goes, oh, there's a new guide for ERM, or oh, there's a new guide, or there's a new framework for corporate governance or for generative AI. No, it's not a new framework. It's the application of a concept to those other frameworks that we already have. And I think you and I have had these discussions a lot about ICIF, Internal Control Integrated Framework, from updated in 2013. It still exists, right? It still is applicable. It's very evergreen. And I'm curious, obviously, I wish you could go back to when it was originally created. Is that what was intended? We want this to be an evergreen thing, but why is it still relevant? Why is there not new frameworks popping up, and why do we keep going back to those as the basis for everything?
Because it was written in such an amazing way, right? Now, I mean, that particular framework, like you said, it's evergreen, and COSO has done a lot of various publications. We have done our sustainability guidance and lean on that framework. We have done the Gen AI paper. We have an RPA paper on our website, again, that leans on this particular framework. And the reason why you're able to do that is that framework was principles and components based. It was not written as a checklist to tell you, go do X, Y, and Z. It was written at a principle level to guide companies to say, hey, if you want to have effective governance, consider these principles, how you're going to operate. As to what you do to implement those and to say, hey, I think we're good. We can map ourselves to that principle because we do X, Y, and Z. It's really up to you. And those activities, which we call point of focus for those that are actually looking for guidance and examples, but those points of focus can evolve, right? They're not requirements. The principles, again, are not requirements themselves either, but they're at the principle level. And so as companies evolve and they adopt more automation, or there's new regulatory changes, you're able to evolve those principles, and how you comply with them is really up to you. And what you do in a large company may be very different than you do at a not-for-profit. But at a principle level, there is a guide to help you manage through changes and risks and, significant transactions or milestones that you have as an organization. And so that model of components and principles is what is truly staying evergreen. And these guides are just going to show you how you can take that evergreen model and apply it to different topical events that we're here to talk about and that occur in our environment.